It's a fan-made sequel to the 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 sequel. It's the fan-made sequel to the 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 sequel. It's the fan-made sequel to the sequel to the visual novel spin-off of the adventure game spin-off of the comic Homestuck. It's FriendSim2.
Jonaya Riley, what a
Yes.
pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks
Thank
so
you
much
so
for being
much.
here.
I'm glad to be here.
And you sort of know about this show, and I sort of know about what
Yes.
you do. So we're gonna like sort of understand each other when we start, and then by the end, I'm guessing we're gonna have like a full-on appreciation for, at least I know
Exactly.
I don't know if you'll appreciate stuff I do, because I barely.
No, I did like a little bit of research when they recommended it, and like
Oh.
I'm familiar with a few of the guests you've had on in the past. Like I know you've talked to, like you mentioned, you talked to Aisha, who obviously is very like I mean I know her. I'm not like personal friends with her, but I share some servers with her and have like spoken to her in the past.
Sure.
And like, you know, I know you spoke to the creator of Validate, which is something I'm familiar with. Danny.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, a few
Danny
episodes
Lalanders?
ago. Yeah, and you also spoke to Laura Kate Day. I don't remember her last name.
Laura
Yeah.
Kate Dale and I go way back.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm familiar with some of the stuff that she's done, and that's really cool. It's a really neat concept for a podcast, and I like it a lot. So
Oh, geez, that's kind. Yeah, the hope is to have people on whom, because of various factors, potentially gender being one of them,
right,
they don't have as much of a platform. If you see who's on
Yeah.
YouTube and Twitch, it's a lot of your standard stuff,
Yeah.
to try to put it politely. So as we do our best to give people additional voice where we can.
Right.
Well, and getting to you, from what I've gathered, voice has been a big part of what you like to do. You like
Yeah.
writing and vocal performances,
Yeah.
to act. But you're also making a visual novel
Mhm.
based in the Homestuck world. It's like straight up Homestuck continuation. And I almost want to call it fan fiction, but I don't think that's the right descriptor, because Homestuck doesn't work like other things, if I'm understanding that right.
The shorthand elevator pitch for what the game that I work on is it's the fan-made sequel to the visual novel spin-off of the adventure game spin-off of the comic Homestuck. The company that sort of like encompasses the official Homestuck content producers, they made an adventure game series, which they're still working on. They're actually working on the part 3 of it presently, and they made a spin-off game called FriendSim, which was sort of a riff on the dating simulator format, but like you were just sort of a narrative insert character making friends with all these aliens, and it was just a way to introduce the characters to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of like took those characters when they came out in the adventure game. They were a little different, like the narrative insert character isn't there, some stuff is different, the plot is different. And then they made a sequel to that visual novel called Pester Quest, which has like the actual Homestuck canon characters in it.
I wasn't, when I hear Pester Quest, I think of Fester's Quest, which is an NES game.
I
played
remember that game.
Do you? Yeah.
Yes.
There's a story behind that I won't get into now, but you're giving us a little glimpse into how the Homestuck world, which started,
2009 was when the comic first came out.
My goodness, I was gonna guess 15 years ago, so almost 14.
Yeah, it's getting close.
It's so enmeshed with the fans. Like I don't know where the line between Homestuck creators and Homestuck fans are. I don't know if there is a line. It feels very blurred.
I don't know that there is one. So I'm, full disclosure, relatively new to the Homestuck fandom in that I've only been here for like 4-ish years. I've heard of Homestuck going back, years and years, but I'd never been. I like started to read it, And then I was like, wow, that's a lot of words. And I got to doing something else and didn't come back to it for a couple of years. But like from very early on, there was a lot of like fan creation and fans that would like began to help out with the comic.
Mm.
And then like that kind of turned into when they started making games, they drew from that community. So you've got people that kind of came up as like fans of the comic that then became like official creators, and then they kind of feed back into like they're also still fans of it. Like people that have done official work for the games are also like creating fan content. And actually, when I went to make the sequel game, which didn't start out being like the level it is now, like the original concept was just, hey, let's take the assets from the first game and just like make a fun little sequel game that's just for fun. We're just going to do it, you know, just to see if we can. And then that spiraled out into, let's actually make like a full sequel that has a comparable level of production to the first game. Just, you know, because I can, and because I wanted to, and because like I wanted to do something for this fandom that means a lot. It like means a lot to me personally. And like a lot of the people that are still around in the fandom are like, they're people that have been involved in producing stuff for the games, or they know people who were, or they're like professional artists or voice actors. And so when I started reaching out to people, it's like we ended up with people who had worked on the official games, or people that have worked in other like professional capacities, and, you know, got together this group of people that included some people who are just like fan artists, and also people who've like worked on the official product, which is really neat. And like we're able to get together a lot of people. Like I think the total number of people working on the game is like 100 something if you include all the voice actors
on FriendSim2.
Yes.
Wow. Jeez.
So it's a big team, but like everyone's doing kind of like a little piece of it, to little being variable depending on who you're talking about. Like
sure, but
yeah.
still, that's a lot of people to coordinate, and a lot of people to it's a huge sign of confidence, I think, that many people want to get involved.
I was like amazed at how enthusiastic people were, because like my experience in the fandom has been a pretty positive one, and like one of the things I've seen has been people coming together on these big projects, and like I established myself enough that people like knew who I was. But when I started like reaching out to people, the level of like, yeah, I want to be a part of this was just like kind of floored me at first.
Yeah, it's hard usually to get people to want to do stuff, because it's scary and it's frustrating and it's for someone else. But I feel like there's something about the Homestuck community that I'm very peripherally aware of, barely understand, to be blunt, where people, it just generates energy and excitement somehow, and people just get enthused and like unafraid to just go for it. There's something about it that like instills bravery in people.
My girlfriend actually has a theory about this, where her theory is that she's also heavily involved in the Homestuck fandom. But like her theory is that because the work has so many like open ends to it, like it's such a massive work, and it has a lot of plot threads that don't get fully resolved, or characters that aren't fully explored, or like stuff that kind of peters out, because I mean, of course it does. It's like 800,000 words long. So like there's a kind of sandbox element to it where people get like the idea that like, oh, this is really fascinating, I'd like to explore, you know, insert thing. And like the same is true for like, so the FriendSim games and like the Hive Swap universe is kind of a spin-off. Like it takes the alien world from Homestuck and like, you know, transposes it to a different time in that universe and deals with different characters. But like it has the same thing where like you learn a little bit about them, but it's like, okay, who are these characters? Like you kind of get this, you know, little bug in your brain about like you want to go in and like figure out more about this and explore what the ramifications of this universe are. And like I find that that's true for a lot of people in the fandom. Like that's the reason we're all here.
I agree with all of that, but I know of a lot of fiction like that. Like
that's true.
J.J. Abrams' Lost has a lot of like plot holes, and it's big, but it didn't. there's something different about Homestuck where it makes people feel like not only, yes, I can do this, but yes, I will do this. And it's
Yeah.
okay that this is completely bananas. That's my guess, is that it started off, from what I've gathered, and again, not an expert, but
Yeah.
like drawings that did not go out of their way to impress. A
Mhm.
storyline that was like strange, but not in a way that was like overtly avant-garde or like trying to be like David Lynch or
Yeah.
trying to be like Werner Herzog or something. It was just like, let's just be silly. And then it slowly gets like super duper deep, from what I've
Yeah.
gathered, and then becomes a vessel for, as you said, 800,000. How many?
Something like 800,000 words of text in
It's
the main comic.
so it
It
like gives people permission who just want to like go deep
yes.
to keep going deep. And then everyone, like, the amount of trust, as you said, people had in you because you showed your authenticity as a member
Yeah.
of this group. You don't join the Fanstuck fandom, I don't think, and get deep with it unless you're authentic, because
Yeah.
I don't know if you even can. Like, can you be a fake Homestuck fan?
I don't think that that's a meaningful like thing to be like. What would
Yeah.
you gain from that, I guess, is
Well,
the question.
and could you like, if I were to go to a Homestuck fan get together,
Mhm.
how much work would it take for me to fake it? Or I would just be seen through immediately,
Yeah.
like there's so much to it that if you don't, there's no
Yeah.
reason to know all that stuff unless you love it, is
There
what I've gathered.
that's the thing. Like there is like when I read the comic, like for some reason, whatever point in my life that was at, and like everything that was happening coalesced to just, it really clicked with me.
Mm.
And I really liked the idea of like expanding on this universe. So I started writing, I started writing fanfic, and I wrote a lot of fanfic, like
Mhm.
over the course of like 3 years, like 1 million-ish words of fanfic.
Wow. Wow.
So like I really enjoyed exploring this setting, and like
Mm.
it gave me an excuse to like I have, I'm not a writer by trade. I'm actually a software developer, but I've done a fair amount of writing, not
Mhm.
just in the Homestuck fandom. And like one of the things that I thought was really fun was to take like a concept and treat it as if it were like a novel, a very rough first draft novel, but like still not just like, oh, this is just a piece of fanfic, but like this is going to be a coherent story that
Mhm.
someone could go in and like, read as if they were reading a novel, albeit with the understanding that they at least know who the characters are in like a basic sense. Like
Sure,
you at
sure,
least
sure.
recognize the names.
Right. Well, yeah, I want to get into that. We've talked a lot about Homestuckness, which I'm
Yeah.
so happy to do, but I bet the listeners are already quite curious. What is FriendSim2? Can I just jump in there, or do I need to experience Pester Quest and Friendship 1 first?
So yeah, so actually one of the things we did in the game was like there's a summary of kind of like the events of the first two games in like the help screen, because we
Okay.
we understood that some people were going to be going in either not having played the two previous games and just being sort of familiar with the world, or not having finished them.
Mm.
Like Friendsim and Past Request aren't like super long games, but they'll take you a good 15 to 20 hours to, and that's probably an exaggeration, 15 to 20 hours for like both of them to kind of go
Mm.
through everything. But like they also kind of provide this, like FriendSim is kind of an overview of the characters. So you're introduced to like 40 different characters, and your player character is this kind of vague representation of the readers of the comic.
Okay.
And there's an overarching plot about the primary antagonist from one of the primary antagonists from the comic, kind of like manipulating this whole world, and then forces you to read Homestuck at the end of FriendSim. And then Pester Quest kind of follows up from there, where you're kind of like going to the characters in the original comic and altering the narrative that happened to them. Our game takes place in the setting of the first one, but it like presumes that the events of both games have occurred. Like the end of Pester Quest involves the creation of like a branching timeline on Earth where all of these characters are kind of like safely, you know, tucked away from all the horrible stuff that happens in Homestuck proper. Which was the point of your character is basically trying to save them from Homestuck. There's like a couple different endings to the game, and that's sort of like true ending you get is the creation of this sort of locked timeline. But one of the things that we did with FriendSim2 is like, so Pester Quest doesn't really address like what happened to the characters in FriendSim. And one of the things that the reason that we wanted to do this game is like, hey, like what happens to them? Like your character is invested in these people, and like what would they do if they started thinking about what was going on with them? And so FriendSim2 starts out with your player character choosing to go back to this world in order to try to like kind of round them all up and be like, hey, I've got this great world that you can run away to and you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Let's go. And due to some narrative stuff that happens and intervention of the main antagonist, they end up transporting themselves back to the same world, but like about 5 years have passed. So time has elapsed, and all of these characters have like their lives have moved on. And this is the world of the game, Alternia, is a very like imperialistic, not great society. It's like if you took America and like dialed it up a little bit. And so there's things like, you know, everyone is forced into usually military or other government service. They're sent off world when they reach a certain age. They're, you know, it's a galactic empire that conquers other worlds. It's very like, it has its own sort of like built-in sort of caste system based on the blood colors of these different aliens. And so it's not a very great world. It's got a lot of very negative implications. And one of the things we were exploring is like, what happens to these characters when they keep living in that system? And so your character, like at the end of Pester Quest, you get all kinds of powers. You can teleport, you can travel through time, you can like do all kinds of crazy stuff. And one of the first things that happens in the game is you lose all of those powers through a sort of narrative device. And the rest of the game, you're basically trying to schlep your way around this world and like find all the people you knew and either try to convince them to leave with you or to like help them try to fight back against this world that you're a part of or that they're a part of. So like, yeah, you could go into the game knowing very little about it and kind of pick it up from context because like enough time has passed that the characters' lives aren't really in the same place that they were. So like if you know the characters, you'll know like, okay, this is why this character is reacting this way, or this is a significant change in this character's life. But if you don't really know much about it, like you just kind of need to know that like, okay, here's the sort of central conceit of the premise of the game and who your character is. Here's what the world is about. And like, then the game tries to provide enough context that you can figure out like what's going on with these characters. And people who are familiar with it are going to get more out of it because you'll be like, oh, I remember this character and like, oh, this is a significant event for this reason. But, you know, I'd say you could go in with pretty little prior knowledge and be okay with it.
It sounds like you aren't having it be, I don't know, like the Matrix 2 was to the Matrix, where you saw Neo fly off and now it's like, what's he do when he flies off next? It's more of a, because of the time jump, which is a great idea, everyone's starting fresh with questions about where everyone is now, and you can pick them up there and then maybe decide to look into the prior games if this is your first ever game with the series. But how do you introduce someone to Homestuck? How did you start with it? Did somebody tell you to read it?
I was on YouTube looking up like animated music videos, as one does. and I had somehow run into like these old Homestuck like AMVs and stuff that people were doing. Like they put together like art of the characters and effects and they put it over a song. And I don't know what triggered that rabbit hole, but I kind of like fell down it, and like I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Oh, these characters are really neat. Like this art is really cool. It's all fan art, so it's all like really, you know, detailed and realistic. And then I was like, I want to know who these people are. And like it was a lot of the trolls who don't show up for like probably about a third of they don't actually show the trolls on screen, the Alternians, for a good chunk of the comic. Like they first actually show them in any substantial way in like Act 5 of the comic.
Really? I wasn't again, I'm fairly Homestuck ignorant, but if I remember correctly, the trolls are a major
they talk to the kids. Like you see their names and you see them talking, but then you don't learn about Alternia until a bit later.
They're the ones with the horns, right?
They're the ones with the horns, the great.
I mean, everyone knows when I see those horns, that's when I know I'm in for it.
There's kind of a running joke about skipping to the trolls, like skipping right through the first 4 acts. And like, yeah, no, wouldn't recommend doing that. So Homestuck is weird because like the first 5 acts are half of the comic. And Act 6 is the second half of the comic. And Act 7 is one very, very high production, like animation that sums everything up. But the beginning of the comic is important because like it's setting up the whole like, you know, narrative. It's setting up the world. It's setting up the rules of this like suburb game that they all play, the world ending game that kind of initiates everything. And it sets up characters like the trolls before they're shown, you know, on the actual screen. And then you learn about like their world, and then you learn about like all this timeline stuff that's happening. So like there's a lot going on.
Oh yeah. I when I try to explain it to people, which is rare, but every once in a while it comes up, I'll be like, do you know the Earthbound fandom? And they're like, oh yeah. So it's weird, but it's still got a lot of like mainstream friendliness. And then I'm like, and then they made Mother 3, and they're like, oh yeah, that one gets into some dark stuff. That one only like super fans have played. I'm like, have you heard of Undertale? They're like, oh yeah, like I've seen their clothes at Hot Topic, but I can't even begin to, there's so much going on there. I'm like, underneath even that, there's this thing called Homestuck. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, it is, I think, a comic and a cartoon and games, and it's also like just a frame of mind. It's like the deepest I think you can get into this particular brand of counter entertainment that is super subversive but cute. Like Earthbound, Undertale, Homestuck, they all have like very appealing, simple characters.
Yeah.
But the level of depth you can get into with all of them, and the surrealism and the symbolism is like really, I don't know of anything else like it. Maybe there is something else that combines that kind of cuteness with deepness.
Undertale and like Homestuck, that like there's a lot of connections between them because Toby Fox, the person who worked on Undertale, was a musician for the Homestuck comic.
That's right.
And had like was friends with Andrew Hussey, so like there's a lot of connection there. And there's a lot of similarities in like how the fandoms are and how I mean, like Undertale is an incredibly creative fandom. Like just the same level of like very high production, you know, whole fan animated series and everything. Like I'm not super knowledgeable about that, but like the things I've seen are just like amazing to the level to which people have expanded it. But yeah, like Homestuck, I mean, it's sort of it's a very web experience. Like it's, you know, it relies on the format of the website. It has Flash games and animations, and unfortunately with Flash's demise, like the official website is kind of like a shell of what it used to be. There's something called the Unofficial Homestuck Collection, which is a downloadable, like basically, I guess, Homestuck viewer, which gives you like the original format for everything.
Oh, wow.
So like you can actually go in and see the comic the way it originally was intended to be seen. Like it plays all the games and animations. You know, they're no longer like links to YouTube videos in low resolution. They're the full Flash experience. So like, but yeah, it's not just one thing. And like, it's interesting, like with Viz Media, when they picked up the rights to distribute the comic and they started printing it, and then they've kind of stalled out, where I think what happened was they're getting to the part of the comic where it becomes very like reliant on that multimedia. It's like, oh crap, how do we make this into like print form?
They could in some ways make it an interactive anime series, I guess, and I think Viz does anime, but
Yeah.
but good luck. I mean,
I'm not, I mean, they're kind of like trying to, I think right now what they're doing is like kind of promoting what they've got and just trying to do something with it, which like, yeah, you know, that's probably a good idea.
yeah, good luck to them. Well,
I
we're
don't
almost out
envy
of
their
time
position.
already. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that if there was anything you wanted to cover, you did a fantastic job explaining how you are continuing a story and how that's sort of the tradition of Homestuck
Yeah.
for the fans to
Yeah, and that's
interact
like
by creating.
that's one of the things I really like. Okay, so like you know, me and some friends had formed a studio and wanted to start making games, and this was kind of like one of the ways of like going through that whole process in a way that would be like, okay, we can do this. Here's a thing that we've made. But also like I said, this is a fandom that means a lot to me, and I wanted to kind of give them an experience of like, I figured, you know, we're probably not likely to see this kind of thing made officially, because like they're making adventure games that are taking up their resources, and like why would they?
Right.
But like I wanted to do something like that and have it feel like an actual official game with the same level of production or greater, and then have people be able to play this and feel like they've got some narrative conclusion. Like, no, it's not canon, but also like the concept of canon in the Homestuck world is very loose and kind of slippery.
Yeah, as it should be. Yeah.
But yeah, and like, you know, it's been really good to I like, I've really enjoyed seeing people's reactions to this, and like seeing people like appreciating the fact that their characters that they like get some like level of closure. You mentioned Aisha that you talked to for a previous episode, and like, so I'm in a writer's Discord that she is also in. A thing I did not realize until I had posted like examples of my work, and I'm like, hey, I made this, you know, fan sequel to FriendSim, and Aisha responded and was like, hey, I directed the original. I'm like, wow. And it was cool because she was like, you know, it was like, hey, it's cool to see another team of people like kind of scrapping this together, and that was neat. Like, I think that the fandom creativity that's something that's kept me in the Homestuck fandom, and like it makes me feel really good that people can come together on something that like means something to them.
Yeah.
And like put that level of passion to creating art, because like I think that's something that it can be difficult to do, especially now with all of the like, you know, capitalism is not great for art, and
and it's getting stronger every day.
It's getting stronger. So like,
yeah.
being able to do something, and like what I ended up doing was basically like being in a position where I had some extra resources and being able to put that into making this, because like, you know, a lot of it is the product of like my own creativity and like the ideas I had, but also a lot of it is the product of all of the other people that have worked on it, like the way things look, the different elements of the plot, like stuff that the other writers have brought in, and things that the team has come up with collectively. And like, it's really neat to see that experience as like a collaborative effort, because like there's so many things that I can't do. Like, I can program and I can write a lot, and I do voice acting, but I can't draw to save my life. So
and when you get to inspire a visual artist to draw something, and then it feeds back into how you perform or write, and then that inspires them, it's a really wonderful feedback loop, and I'm so glad you found it.
Me too. And like, and the other thing is like working with people who like building these collaborative relationships where, you know, the next game that we make, once we're done with this one, we can come back to that and like do something with, we're probably not going to be making another Homestuck game, but making something in another world that can use that same kind of creative vision, and you know, allowing people to collaborate and create these worlds together. Like, that is a really cool experience, and like that's what's made doing this worthwhile. And like, it's a lot of work, and like, I don't get paid for it, so like there's not really a lot of like there's no incentive in the capitalist sense of the word, but like I don't feel like that matters all that much if you're able to do something that you're really passionate about, and like that is going to be something that people can engage with and, you know, continue to engage with like long after I'm done with this. And you know, it's not going to go away. Thankfully, What Pumpkin has been very chill about us putting this game on Steam.
Well, yeah, if you start selling it, I'm sure that'll be a different story.
I was gonna say, I feel like if we charged money for it, that would change very quickly. But like the whole point of this was not to do that. It was to give people something that they could play without having to pay money. And the original games are often on sale. So like you could probably go through this whole experience for like maybe $10 if you wait for a sale.
And hours and hours of
yes,
exploration in your mind of this world. Jonaya, it's such a pleasure. The Zoom call is about to self-destruct. It only has 90 seconds left. So I guess I'll close it up. Thank you so much for being on the show, and please feel free to come back anytime. I predicted I would be an enthusiastic fan of what you're doing by the time we finish talking, and once I was right about something.
Awesome. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Like, again, I really appreciate like what you're doing with the podcast. I think that's a really cool idea. And like, you know, I seeing some of the people you've talked to in the past is like, yeah, that's really neat. So
thank you.
I'd be happy to come back sometime later when I've got something else, probably non-Homestuck related, to talk about.
Yeah, we'd love to catch up again soon.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, Jonaya, great to have ya. Come on back, won't you join us? Oh, Jonaya, great to have ya. Come on back, won't you join us?